Hi, so nice to see you guys. I'm back for our Wellbeing Wednesday this month. Welcome to anybody who's new. Yeah, I'm Megan, and coming at you with whatever theories I feel that are like right on the cusp of, learning and science and things that I find are kind of trending or in chats at the moment in terms of supporting with healing. And often, sometimes, I come across things in like a podcast or in my own personal trainings. And tonight, I've been hearing this buzzword. And I really wanted to pay attention to it in a little bit more detail because my own perception of it was actually sort of negative in terms of you know how it could actually make a difference to me or to our healing or to anybody who's been through trauma, myself included. And this big word that I'm kind of alluding to is forgiveness. I've been recently referencing a lot of the let them theory concepts that have come from Mel Robbins. I'm also a huge reader of Joe Dispenza. And I keep hearing this buzzword of like, we need to forgive in order to move on. But it's really difficult, isn't it? Because my own perception of forgiveness was like, but does that mean that, like, what do you mean by forgiveness? Because, how do you forgive some of those bigger things? Like there are things that I can think unimaginable to forgive. Um, and so I wanted to kind of just break down the topic in our session today, break down some of the myths, but actually what they mean by forgiveness as a tool to work through trauma. So today's title is The Freedom That Can Come from Forgiveness and Rewiring the Brain for Healing Through Forgiveness. So yeah, let's break it down and let's see, how we can make this work for us. But yeah, the first thing that I want to highlight is the number one message tonight when talking about this is that forgiveness, it's not about the person or the situation that you are thinking about forgiving. It's about freeing you. It's so much less about the other person or the situation in which has caused or maybe is causing you to feel angst or overwhelm. Yeah, it's interesting because forgiveness can actually support us in rewiring the brain, where our brain goes into that lovely protection, and that kind of traps us when we experience trauma. You have this concept that can actually free us, which I find very interesting. So let's dip our toe into it on this Wellbeing Wednesday. My big question is this, it's a question for us to reflect on. And it says, what if forgiveness wasn't about forgetting, but about finally feeling free? I'm going to say that one more time. So, what if forgiveness wasn't about forgetting? It's about finally feeling free, free from the heaviness, the weight, the all of the emotion, turmoil, the rumination, going round and round of the thoughts and the thinking and the what if. What if forgiveness is about feeling free? And if it was, how great could that be? So some of the neuroscience is that we create a level of neuroplasticity. And so just to recap, I'm sure from your work with Bon or what, I don't know which part of your journey that you're on with her course, but neuroplasticity in its basic form is the brain's ability to rewire itself. So we, have these like pathways. I massively imagine them like pathways in the woods, and that we normally take the most beaten down path to get somewhere. And when the body and the brain have experienced trauma, then we go into fight or flight, and then our body thinks that most things around us are potentially going to be something we need to go into survival mode for. So we live tight in the chest, we live quite high in short, sharp breaths, and we potentially live with this, always in that like fight, flight, freeze response. And that's, it's part of our neuroplasticity and part of our brain and our body. That is our default mode, isn't it? And if we can tackle a little bit of that, we can find a way in which we can move through it. And we have this part of our brain called the amygdala, which is kind of like more in the middle. And I imagine it kind of like our fire alarm. So when the fire alarm's going off, like ding, 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 you can imagine like the noise makes you think like I've got to get out of here. You got to drop everything. I've got to stop. I'm gonna, fight, flight, or freeze, and that amygdala is going off for, us or others around us who maybe have had past experiences, that level of kind of PTSD, that those feelings and emotions, we almost become so used to them, they feel like a safe place for us, and that's because the brain, that's our beaten down path. That's like our most common route of thinking, and our amygdala is used to going off, and we need to turn the fire alarm off so that our prefrontal cortex, that part of the brain that helps us like make really clear decisions from a calm space, that helps us see perspective clearly. It allows us to feel some level of empathy. If we can kind of turn the fire alarm down, check in with our brain and what are our pathways? Can we form some other ones? Then maybe we can get to a place where our thinking is coming from, a healthier space, I suppose, from a space where we're not acting from a fight, flight response, from a place of a stress response. So, what happens is unforgiveness keeps the stress response active. So if we are living, I definitely have, my own personal examples of this, but I probably have lived years and years and years in a space of unforgiveness, which I didn't really realize that maybe my whole fight flight response, my amygdala, me thinking that every time I turn the corner, something else is going to kind of happen to me, it could potentially be that I haven't addressed this space of letting go, all right, or forgiveness, of finding space to let go. And chronic stress, when we feel that stress response, when we're living in a space of unforgiveness, this is all science suggests that we have elevated cortisol in the body, which is another little buzzword, and in turn we have a little bit of a weakened immunity, maybe more disturbed sleep, and maybe that emotional dysregulation, just not quite feeling our best selves. Cortisol could probably be a whole talk in itself, but it's elevated when we're in stress. But if we can find a place where we're able to let go, and we can find a space of, we'll talk about the myths of forgiveness. We can find a space where we can find a way to let go, separate ourselves from that unforgiveness, find a space that is more of a place of forgiveness. We lower our cortisol and we increase in our body oxytocin. And oxytocin is that like love, trust, comforting hormone. That's like what you feel when you get a cuddle from somebody safe, or when you're just in the presence of things that feel really good and happy for you, anything at all that brings you that sense of joy. That is again as well a place where we're starting to activate healing in the brain, and oxytocin and all of these like positive chemicals make such a difference. So if science is right and forgiveness is a route towards that, it feels like something that should be kind of explored. And so a few studies, there was a study at Stanford that showed forgiveness-based therapy reduced depression and PTSD symptoms significantly. And that brain scans showed increased activity in the prefrontal cortex. And that all started to happen. Another part of the brain called the right temporal, I can't even say it, the junction, it's parietal junction. I'm so sorry. The science that I know loads of psychology, but that word is just not one for me. But anyways, two massive parts of the brain in these scans lit up, and those they lit up when they had studied people in the act of forgiveness, and these areas linked to compassion and self-reflection And in that point, you could see that those two parts of the brain where we are feeling, clear, peaceful, that aspect of those brains are generating those positive chemicals we talked about. It is pretty cool to see that science is exploring this even further. So I wanted to talk a little bit about where the idea is kind of like at the forefront, and that's from you can find loads of his books. His name's Dr. Joe Dispenza. If you really like the deep sciencey stuff, and don't worry if you don't, maybe it's just not the right book. But there's one of his books is called Becoming Supernatural, or you can maybe look up some of his TED Talks if you find any of this interesting. But just a little side note. But I wanted to talk a little bit about Joe Dispenza's view on forgiveness because he is what we would describe a thought leader at this point in time. And he's leading the way in terms of ways in which we can escape from our trauma, from our past, and live in a place where we can really have everything we ever desired. And his key ideas suggest that forgiveness is necessary to break the emotional addiction to the past. I really liked that thought. So if we're thinking a little bit about unforgiveness as an addiction, it feels like a safe place to be. Forgiveness, it says it's necessary to break an emotional addiction. And he says that emotions are stored as energetic signatures in the body. So the whole body is feeling this energetic feeling of like unforgiveness. And he says, until we forgive, we continue to broadcast this same emotional frequency, and we start to continue to maybe attract similar experiences. And the more that I read, I find it very interesting, this concept that maybe we are attracting, or we are finding, living in a space of unforgiveness, anger, frustration. I certainly can relate to that in some ways. That feels like a safe place. It feels like we're going into fight or flight, trying to get out of it. But equally, we are desperate to have that, but it's become our safe space. It's become our comfort zone. So we do need to find something different to try and break those molds, to form a new pathway in the woods, new pathways in the brain, so that we start to maybe over time shift, our default mode, and we begin to live a little bit with more clarity rather than kind of always coming from that fight, flight, freeze response, that stress response in the body. And it says your body's like the unconscious mind. If your body is still reliving the hurt, even if your mind says, I'm over it, you're not quite free from it yet. And Dispenza has this little process. He kind of believes that you can, just through meditation, you don't actually have to, in terms of forgiveness, I'm going to talk about some of the myths and what I mean by forgiveness, examples of forgiveness, to kind of work through our healing. But it doesn't mean that you have to sit in front of somebody and say, I forgive you. It doesn't even mean that you need to say, I forgive you. It means that you have the ability to say, like, this is not going to hold me anymore. I am going to let this go. I'm going to almost forgive in order for me to be free. I'm going to let you do you. And that's quite powerful. Joe Dispenza's process is through meditation and visualization. He uses that to reprogram the subconscious mind. He says you can't create a new future while holding on to the emotions of the past. And actually, if we really broke that down, it does make sense, doesn't it? Which it's interesting. So if you wanted to look a little bit more into that, there are guided visualizations. There's loads and loads of things online with Joe Dispenza. But I'll take you through a few examples as we move through our talk today on how we can maybe work on reprogramming that subconscious. But the myths I think that are really important to break down, I kind of thought that it was important to talk about that forgiveness does not mean condoning the behavior. So that is a myth. We're not, forgiveness is not a term we're using to say, I condone the behavior that is like making me upset or made me upset. It doesn't even mean that you need to go and apologize first. So when I think of forgiveness, I definitely was like, but I don't want to be the one to apologize. You don't even have to. You never have to have a conversation with somebody. It's about taking the space to recognize like what it is that you need to let go of in order for you to feel free, in order for you to live in, the life that you want, to be clear in mind, to have that space where the body feels, content and not always in stress response. And the other bit as well is forgiveness does not even mean that you have to forget what happened. So my three myths there, like it doesn't mean condoning the behavior. It doesn't mean apologizing first, and it doesn't mean forgetting what happened. But forgiveness in its truest sense, in terms of healing, is a gift to yourself. And it actually does not at all require the other person's participation. It is about you changing your thinking around it. Okay. It's less and less about sitting in front of somebody saying, I forgive you for that awful. No, there's some things you're not going to forgive. It's in the sense of like saying it in that definition of it. We're looking at forgiveness in the sense of letting go so that you can be free. Okay. And forgiveness isn't just a thought. It is a felt sense in the body. So when people talk a lot about, trauma stores in the nervous system, it suggests that forgiveness actually calms the autonomic system, shifting from the sympathetic, that's your fight or flight system, into your parasympathetic, your rest and digest. And so forgiveness supports, and that is when we're talking a little bit about somatic body releases, that just kind of taking on some of the strategies I will explore in a bit. It suggests that these will help you not only in mind but in body to maybe shift and move forward in your life, rather than living and reliving the past and that feeling of, all the feelings that come with unforgiveness. I definitely can relate with anger and resentment and all sorts. But we can't live our whole lives letting, that experience win. And that is what this is. It's this letting go concept. So one easy way to start the process, if you are somebody who feels, open to breath work, I think breath work is worth its weight in gold. And I'm not necessarily saying you need to go into some, you can go to breathwork classes. People find it like life changing, but something simple is like just putting like a hand on the heart or both hands on your heart, and just we're going to breathe in for full 4, hold for 4, and breathe out for 6. Okay, so we're going to exhale slow, but we're going to take a little hold in the middle. And as we exhale, I'm going to say for you, I'm safe to let go. And then I want you to start thinking as we say exhale, maybe you can say it, it's great that this session is something that you can watch on replay. So maybe you feel more comfortable not doing it a live sense. Maybe you can say, I am safe to let go. So I'm going to try it with you. I think it's really helpful. It's something that I've done many a times when I'm just feeling like I'm holding a lot for, somebody else or a situation that's totally over. It's out of my control now, but I'm holding on to it. So you can have one hand on the heart, 2 hands. I quite like crossing them over. And then I'm going to breathe in. Ready? Breathe in. 1, 2, 3, 4, hold, 2, 3, 4, exhale, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Breathing in for 4, hold, exhale, I am safe to let go. Inhaling, holding. In your head, I'm safe to let go. Exhale. Inhale. Hold. Exhale. I am safe to let go. Now, if you continue that over and over, you might start to shift. You might feel a shift in the body. Even in 3 breaths, I personally can feel things shifting in the brain. I feel a little bit calmer. Small, subtle changes, but if you really pay attention, it's quite powerful. Deep breath, I'm safe to let go. I'm safe to let go. And that's such a great way to do it. Another one that I personally found very powerful in a group situation that I still do on my own from time to time is I light a candle. And I think a little bit about the situation that I'm like ruminating on. And when we talk about rumination, if you've not come across that before, we're talking about this idea of like, where you feel like your thoughts like just going in circles and circles, and you've just relived that in your head over and over and over, all the feelings and the emotions, and you're just kind of going back over something, and you're like, why am I still thinking about that? I thought about this way too much in my life. Like it's not, I need to stop. I often will light a candle and I'll sit and I'll watch the candle flicker, which is a form of meditation. I'll be thinking about whatever it is, and I give myself space to think about it. And then I decide in that moment, like I'm going to let it go. I let it go. And I breathe in and I say, I let it go, and I blow out my candle. And just literally, you can do that as many times as you want. It's such a healthy process and something really powerful, a physical way to get a little bit of a release, not just, in thoughts, but in body. And there's other ways as well. So, really famous for suggesting a letter that you never send. That's something that I do so often with clients. So often when, forgiveness in action, here's some of your strategies. A really great way to work through it is maybe write a letter to the person who hurt you, and do not hold back. Like I'm talking, you go for it. You get all of those things that you've been thinking and feeling, you get that out on paper. You write every emotion, put every word that you feel like is deserved in that. And like just go for it. Write everything down. Get it out of your head. Get it on paper or start typing it. If you feel like it's overwhelming you, you feel like you've thought about it way too many times. And at the very end, this is the big thing. I'd write this down, put a star beside it, or come back to the video. At the end, just write, I choose now to let it go. I no longer carry what you left behind. So that's a lovely one. I'll say that again. I now choose to let it go. I no longer carry what you left behind. I no longer carry it. And that's the forgiveness. I no longer carry it. You're not saying that like, I forgive you. And then, like I said, it's the letter you never send. You just take time to say, I choose to let it go. I no longer carry what you left behind. There's a few things you can do with that letter. Sometimes it feels really good to just take it, print it out, or, the power of ripping it up into tiny, tiny pieces and chucking it in a bin, burning it in a fire. Like it is so significant often to do something physical in order to kind of get a shift in brain and body. But equally, you could just keep it saved, tuck it away in case you want to reread that and see like, how did I really feel about that situation, and move through that. It's such a good one. So that's one strategy to kind of put forgiveness into action. And again, it's about saying, I no longer carry this. I let you go. Forgiveness visualization is one that's inspired by Joe Dispenza. So yeah, something that's really, again, on the forefront of kind of the thought leaders and ways to work through trauma. He says this, he says, lay down, obviously, or you can sit in an upright position, but find a space where you feel comfortable getting into a forgiveness visualization. And we're just going to kind of see if we can picture something, and move through it. So what I want you guys to do is just sit. I love this one. And see if you can picture, if it doesn't bring up too many issues, maybe you can picture the person in front of you, if that feels comfortable. Again, this is all a buffet, it might not. And if you feel comfortable and it's not too triggering, to maybe picture that person in front of you. Or you can picture a symbol. I often like a symbol because there's a few situations. Sometimes I picture a symbol like a black heart. and or something like that, or a big black hole, like something that represents like this is like something that has been not a pleasant for me. It's created lots of stored trauma, stress response, worry. You want to picture something there that represents that, okay? Or if you feel that it's worth it, if it's something like that you can picture the person, that's always a great way. So you sit in your visualization, see if you can see. I'm picturing like a nice black heart. And then what I want you to do is I want you to imagine that you are handing back the emotional pain that they gave you. I want you to like take it. And it's if you can do this, like I know that I hold mine in my chest. Like, where do you hold that? Is it in your stomach? Is it in your shoulders? Take that emotional pain and imagine that you're giving it back. You're putting it back into that black hole or that big black heart, or you're giving it back to that person. And you just say in your head, you just say, or out loud, like often, if you feel comfortable, just say, this does not belong to me anymore. This does not belong to me anymore. And you just hand it back. You hand it back. You get rid of it. You put it back into that space. And I think that in itself, a forgiveness visualization, handing something back and saying, this does not belong to me anymore, it can be so powerful. It can be something that I've seen many clients like find very difficult, but obviously very healing. Joe Dispenza, again, his work is powerful, and that in itself, that simple piece, I think, is just next level. So maybe try it. Maybe don't be afraid, to have a go of some of these like unique pieces. And it doesn't mean that the second that you do it, it's going to just all be gone, but you might for that moment feel like you've left a piece of it and another little piece of it through another technique. And then maybe you come back to this one during another time when you'd felt something upset you and you want to let it go. And it all just becomes your brain's pathway shifts from fight, flight, stress response into, hey, I have an amazing toolbox here that can support me in moving through. So I'm gonna grab a quick drink on my talking. Cheers, everyone. I hope you like those ideas. And again, this doesn't have to always just be about you. You could always take other people around you through these things. It's very helpful skills just for life stuff. I think it's super powerful. And another one, which I think is really cool, and it is, again, takes some guts. But number 3 would be doing some mirror talking. And it is a strategy where you literally just sit and look at yourself in the mirror. And what I want you to say to yourself, again, you can write it. A great idea would be to write this on a Post-it and stick it on there. But look at yourself and say, I forgive myself for holding on to what I didn't deserve. I forgive myself. So you're forgiving you for holding on to what I didn't deserve. And that is a way of being like, I'm forgiving myself for holding on to this. And it's something I didn't deserve. I'm letting this go. I'm forgiving myself. And again, we're shifting. And remember, we talked about all those great things that forgiveness does for us: brain, body, neural pathways, all of the somatic, in the nervous systems, in the chemical reactions, lowering our cortisol. Like, it could be physically, mentally life-changing to use some of these techniques to potentially let go. And when I say let go, my journey personally wasn't like I did one of these and it all just went away. Like, it's not the way things happen, but it allowed me to shed a little piece of it and shed another little piece of it, another little piece of it, so that it is not trapping me in my life anymore. And I'm allowed, and I feel like I'm working way clearer from that prefrontal cortex. And also, I now know when my amygdala is going off, my fire alarm. I'm like, hey, I need to just bring you back, bring my body back with some breathing. And I need to come back to this space so that I can use some of these techniques to rewire and reset and rethink. I have some great, if you're a little bit newer, I think I don't know, maybe maybe a few months ago, I had done a workshop on journaling and the power of writing prompts for healing. And if that feels like something that works for you, you can type it. And I always say that journaling doesn't have to be like, hey, I'm gonna like write for days. It could be mind mapping some of these questions. But journaling for healing in this, area is great. Just getting things out of your head and onto paper is awesome. But some of the questions that I use often to work through is this. So if you have space, you can, write them down, come back to them. But the very first question is, what pain am I still carrying that is not mine to carry? That's a bit of a big question. Is there any pain that you're holding that you don't need to be holding anymore? Can you let go? Can you, recognize that that is not a pain for you to carry? Are you carrying someone else's heaviness? And what would freedom like? Question number 2, what would freedom feel like in my body if I let this go? Can you think of any words at all? What would freedom feel like in my body if I were able to let this go, whatever it is, and things come and, like highs and lows. You might not have anything at the moment, or you might think this is really going to support me. But what does this freedom look like? What part of your body, maybe when we looked at like giving back, all of this heaviness, like I give this back to you. It's not mine to carry. Like it wasn't my fault. I'm passing this back. But like, what would the body look like? How would you feel? Where would you be breathing? What would you be doing? How would you be standing? What would you try that you had been thinking about for so long? Where would you go? What would you see? What kind of, things would change for you if you really did choose to let this go? And then the next bit is says, who do I need to forgive today? And my big question is, could it be you? And I'm not saying like, remember, that could be triggered. We're not looking at that old definition. Like we're looking at what is it that if you let go of this, it will help. And maybe what part, sometimes we create these like limiting beliefs about ourselves, really hard on ourselves because of our past. Is there a place at which you could forgive yourself as well for things that maybe absolutely weren't your fault, but maybe there's like a level at which you're looking at yourself going, well, if I, it's time to forgive yourself. It's time to be kind to yourself. It's time to be empathetic to yourself. It's time to show yourself that, that light and that kindness and that softness. And until you forgive yourself, that's a space where we will potentially feel stuck. Can you reflect a little bit on that today? And the last bit is maybe a question on like, what belief have I attached to the pain that is written, that is ready to be rewritten? So can you let go of any of that pain? Do you feel comfortable? Sometimes is it more comfortable to stick with it than to try some of these like things? Or, let's rewrite this story for you. That's kind of what we're exploring. So yeah, maybe like rewriting the belief is kind of what we're going for. So like, I'm no longer available for pain I did not cause. Like that is a strong statement. I'm no longer available for pain I did not cause. I'm no longer going to hold on to someone else's life experiences. Like I do not have to take on that responsibility. That's theirs. And I think it's great. I think there's so many things in that. Mel Robbins, I briefly talked about at the beginning, and I've done a whole talk on a little bit of her theory of the let them approach. She writes a great book called The Let Them Theory. She's got some awesome podcasts if you wanted to look her up. But her idea is that what we need to do is start to approach things by saying, like, let them. Like if something's triggering you, somebody's frustrating you, her idea is like we just need to say, let them. And then what you have then is you get your power back, because the second part of the phrase is let me. And let me give you an example of this. So you might have, she gives an example in her book about her son and her daughter. And her daughter, for example, she's American. Her daughters both went to prom. She was really fully invested, got all like picked up the dresses, like made all the appointments, booked all their cars, made sure the after party was at their house. And Mel was like really, really fully involved with her daughters, making all these decisions. And then when their son started to go through prom, she was like, "Hey, are you going to go to prom?" And he was like, "Yeah." And then she felt like it was starting to like grate on her as a parent that she was um, reaching out and he was giving short answers, didn't really respond when she was like, "Do you want to go buy something? Do you want to pick something out? Who are you gonna take?" Like all of the questions, and he was just like, "I'll figure it out." Like, and eventually found out that he had asked somebody, and she was literally feeling this like frustration about her son's prom and frustration about what he was going to wear and who he's going to take. And she even went as far as to like once he found a date and things, like ordered like a lovely corsage for her because that's like tradition. But he said, "Mom, whatever you do, don't order corsage, please. Like it's just not the way we do things." And she was like, "We can't turn up empty-handed to this person." And then she was stressing that they had no dinner plans and all of this stuff you could imagine. And then when push came to shove, like they all met up and they turned up and everyone's excited because it's prom night, and her and so the girl and her son, like they go to take a photo, and all of the other guys go to give the girls these corsages. And so Mel sat there like a little bit in her boots, and like, "Of course, thank goodness I bought this corsage. You know, he would look so silly. He'd be the one that wasn't that thoughtful." And all of a sudden, she jumps right in and she goes and she gives this corsage. And she's like, "Oh, he's got you one." And he was mortified because what she didn't realize is that the girl was really creative and she had already made them like matching. So she had already had one that matched her outfit. He had already had one that like something that was made, and they were just about to get those out. And now she had this other one on her arm that she didn't want, that he said, "Don't get it." So anyways, this story, not necessarily like trauma based, but the story is that all of a sudden the daughter looked at her mom and she went, "Mom, just let them. You got to just let them live. You got to let them do prom the way they want to do prom." She said that it made like stopped her in her tracks and she took a really big deep breath. She thought, "Oh my God, yeah, why have I spent months fixated on controlling this situation? One, it's not my prom. Two, like I'm obsessing over this. I know I want the best for my son and whatever, but I'm obsessing over this and I just need to let them." And then the second part of this theory is like, let me, like, what can I do? And actually, in that situation, she just needs to really sit back and look around, and when asked she can support, right? Or she's kind of realized that she's overstepped. And then everybody was talking about where they were going to go for dinner, and they all wanted to go to this Mexican restaurant, and she knew that the Mexican didn't have like enough seats for all of these young people, and they hadn't had a reservation. And he's going out and they're going to get their brand new shoes and outfits wet in the rain because they haven't booked taxis. And she just sat there with what her daughter said to her. Well, a few of the other parents started to flap, and she went to pick up her phone to phone, and then she went, "No, I gotta just let them. I have to let them have the prom that they want." And these kids went out, they ran around, they had their Mexican, they all kind of stood. It was messy, it was wet, it was fun. And that is what her son's experience was. But that's what they wanted it. They wanted it low key. That was their choice. And for her, when she says the let me side of things, it's like, what actually can I do here? What are my choices? And her choice was either to get involved or to just step back and just, "Oh, well, it's not really mine to worry about. Why am I fixating?" I mean, there's times in life where we do need to jump in. If it's like a small child, we can't just let them run in the middle of the road. But we're talking about like these adult situations. How often are we sat there really holding on to something, and all it takes once in a while is to think like, hold on a minute, like I'm gonna like it could be a level of forgiveness, right? This idea like I'm just gonna let them, like I'm gonna let them do their thing. And it can fit into any aspect of life from jealousy, we have to let people be great and let people, I'm going to let them be better than me rather than holding on to this like jealousy and angst that I didn't do it first, and look at it and be like, what are my choices? I can learn from what they're doing, or I can, you know, I can be in this bubble of jealousy. I have to let them do great and let me celebrate and learn from that. And it equally works in situations of trauma. We just need to just think, I'm just going to let them, that person that holds on to you, all that power, just going to let them be them and actually let me take my power back and make some decisions that suit me in my life. I need to let them do them and let me make the choices that I can around that, as much as possible. It's very freeing. I've definitely applied it in many different situations and found myself tapping right back. And, the let me part gets me back into my prefrontal cortex. The let them is like this detachment, and it's really great. So, the entire book was phenomenal. And she goes through loads and loads of different scenarios, whether it's like relationships, anything at all. I think that she covers it in the Let Them Theory book. I listened to it on audiobook, actually, and I found it really, really great way to take in the information. So a little suggestion for you if you found that at all interesting. So yeah, all in all, the power, it's about the power of choice. Forgiveness, it's not about justice, actually, like even though that's what it sounds like. It's not about being like, you're rolling over and saying that person did right. Absolutely not. That's never going to be right in every situation. But forgiveness is more about peace. It's about finding that space and that peace and that detachment so that you're not letting these feelings take over you. Yeah, and I'd say that forgiveness is a radical act of self-love. It's self-care, self-compassion. So yeah, a really lovely idea is that forgiveness is the final act of reclaiming your power. And you, my friend, are powerful beyond measure. So yeah, just a little recap before I log off. Maybe try the breathing technique. It might be really great. Maybe write down some of those power statements or those strong affirmations. It can be like your forgiveness first aid kit, I suppose. Your breathing technique, maybe visualization that you've done where you give it back, maybe using one or a few of the journaling types. And yeah, Joe Dispenza's quote here, I love. It says, to change is to think greater than your environment. So think greater, think bigger, dream and experience freedom in your visualizations. And hopefully you'll be able to find that from, the tough stuff, the heavy things that you've been through. So yeah, or maybe just say, let them take a deep breath. Just let me now look at, what are my choices? I can do this, I could do this, I could do this, and find one that comes from a place of calm and peace. So that you feeling your best self is number one, and that you can enjoy all the things that are great around you. All right, that is your Wellbeing Wednesday. I can't thank you enough for your time. And I am, like Bon said, I'm uploading this. So if you have any questions at the end, I will be really quick to respond. I'll be looking at anything that you write in the feed, ask me any questions. I really thank you. And yeah, peace and love, team. Speak soon.